It on. Call around.
Tony and tell you that he's full.
It come.
Honourable members, I announce the absence of His Honour the Speaker, and the Deputy Speaker will preside at today's sitting.
Let us pray. Let us pray. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder. His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Sovereign Lord, as we pray for those who occupy high office in this land, may the wisdom of the Wonderful Counselor guide you. May the strength of the mighty God defend you. May the love of the everlasting Father enfold you, and the peace of the Prince of Peace be with upon you. And the blessing of God, Almighty, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, be upon us all this Advent and Christmas season, and forevermore. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
A blessed good morning, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen. This chamber is in session. Minutes of meetings. October the 22nd. Tuesday, October the 22nd. To be confirmed.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
Question is that these minutes be confirmed. Honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. These minutes stand confirmed. Minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, the 26th of November, 2024, to be deferred. Honorable member.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The question is that these minutes
Be deferred.
of Tuesday, the 26th of November, 2024 be deferred. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. These minutes stand confirmed.
Announcements by Your Honor the Deputy Speaker. Messages from Your Excellency the President. Petitions, papers. Minister.
Honourable member.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm commanded to lay the financial statements of the Engineers Registration Board for the fiscal years ended March 31st, 2020, March 31st, 2021, and March 31st, 2022. I'm also commanded to lay the audited financial statements of the Grantley Adams International Airport for the year ended March 31st, 2024.
Government notices.
Government notices, the order of the day. Honourable member.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to give notice of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2024.
Private members' notices. Notices of questions. Reports from select committees. First readings of bills.
Of the
Honourable member.
beg to move the first reading of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2024.
The question is that the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2024 be read the first time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The standing orders of the day have been suspended. The leader of government's business.
Government business.
Government's business is the order of the day.
In the name of the Honourable Minister of Tourism and International Transport, to move the second reading of the Maritime and Underwater Heritage Bill 2024.
Honourable member for St. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I rise this morning to, as the clerk informed the chamber, to move the reading of the Maritime, Underwater and Heritage Bill 2024. And Madam Deputy Speaker, before I go into the depth of the bill and provide the relevant explanations and rationale behind the bill, I want to start, as I will conclude, by thanking the officers within the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport for the remarkable work that they have and they continue to do on behalf of the people of Barbados. This bill is the latest in a series of installments of bills coming through to this honorable chamber, addressing issues relating to maritime and a number of other issues relating to how best we can build out this very important sector, like I said, for the benefit of all Barbados. It is worth noting that on a previous occasion, and we were here, and indeed the last occasion, we went through the merchant shipping suite of legislation, and that has already passed this chamber and the other chamber. And therefore, today is no exception as it relates to the quality of work done by the officers within the ministry. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is important that we go back, as I've said in previous debates, and acknowledge that what led to where we are today. And it had to do with the 2018 International Maritime Organization audit. And in that audit, a number of deficiencies were found. And as a responsible government would do, we are moving with haste to correct those deficiencies and to ensure we build out this sector. And effectively, as it relates to the legislation that we are bringing to this honorable chamber, it speaks to the whole issues of how do you regulate ships consistent with the International Maritime Organization standards as well as their conventions. And therefore today, we are here to discuss the Maritime and Underwater Heritage Bill. And I must start by making the point that within the International Maritime Organization, there is the overarching framework known as the United Nations Convention on Law of the Seas, which effectively, and some people refer to as the Constitution of the Oceans. And I perhaps felt I should start there by giving you an understanding of where we are. Madam Deputy Speaker, the issues contained in the bill that we have to address, and essentially what the bill was designed to do, it was to comprehensively manage coastal state activities specific to maritime and cultural heritage, to ensure a holistic legislative framework underpinned by policy considerations and, of course, best practices embedded in the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, United Nations UNESCO heritage regimes, as well as best practices. And of course, as I indicated not so long ago, to remedy a number of the deficiencies contained in the International Maritime Audit of 2018. In that audit, and it's worth repeating for honourable members, that there was an absence of maritime policy, structure, and culture within the maritime administration to overall regulate and periodically review the performance in relation to coastal state activities. And that there was also a need for effective regulations of vessels. And of course, this House will remember that we went through the domestic shipping bill, which is now confirmed as an act. And we also did a number of other pieces of subsidiary legislation in order to ensure that we remain compliant. The Maritime and Underwater Heritage Bill provides the regulatory framework for the environmentally safe and ecologically sustainable engagement in activities pertaining to maritime culture and natural heritage within the ambits of the flag, port, and coastal state control. This means, therefore, that Barbados registered vessels, both Barbados and foreign registered vessels, calling at our ports or otherwise undertaking maritime heritage activities in our waters, including personnel on board such as vessels, are subject to the requirements of the legislation. Of course, other ocean state responsibilities, including governance of the ocean, regarding capturing synergies between shipping and coastal, maritime, and tourism and ocean-related activities. The bill also seeks to implement the coastal state duties, again under the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, and it essentially contains a number of duties. And one, for example, is the duty to prevent, reduce, and control pollution of the maritime environment from all sources of pollution, including vessel source pollution. A duty as well to protect the maritime environment from the pollution of vessels, of course, preventing accidents, especially those dealing with emergencies. A duty to protect the maritime environment from pollution from installation and devices used in exploration or exploitation of natural resources of the seabed and the subsoil. Of course, a duty to ensure that all activities under its jurisdiction and control are so conducted as not to cause damage by pollution to other states and their environment. And of course, I think members know this well, because if there are any drilling or accidents occurring, it could spill into another state's territorial waters. And therefore, the bill addresses those issues. In respect of the heritage, maritime heritage, of course, it's subject to the international regulatory regime for cultural and heritage under the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, the regime. It also speaks to cultural heritage protection, and also the marine salvage and wreck regime, which is contained in the Salvage and Wreck Convention, to which Barbados is a party. Of course, there's also the General Admiralty Law and Salvage, and of course, this is about the guardians or custodians of the ocean's cultural and natural heritage. And of course, the role of shipping in maritime heritage is not only seaborne, it also supports commerce and trade, but it also supports engagement in other maritime activities, such as cultural and heritage exploration. The maritime heritage and tourism the recently debated merchant shipping legislation therefore explicitly provides for the registration of deep sea mining work vessels, special purpose vessels that are specifically designed to engage in particular activities. And of course, those were covered in the merchant shipping legislation. The Marine Heritage and Tourism Bill, Underwater Heritage Bill, not only regulates tangible heritage assets at sea by vessels, but it also undertakes the role of the protector of the heritage by ordinary persons. And this is to ensure, of course, that local persons and others who can explore, interact, and benefit from Barbados' marine and cultural heritage. The Maritime Underwater and Heritage Bill also provides an effective framework that enhances the relationship between tourism, natural and cultural resources by strengthening tourism, environment, heritage, people linkages, enhancing the role of shipping in the facilitation of deep sea heritage activities, and promoting the development of Barbados' maritime heritage economy to its fullest extent. So effectively, Madam Deputy Speaker, heritage tourism, as you will note, is a major driver of the maritime heritage economy, and it includes more specific things related to tourism that I will come to shortly. The legislative framework for the design of the bill, it details the regulatory framework. It talks about what will be achieved through recreation, research, educational activities, experiences, and commercial ventures that connect people. But it's also crafted, more importantly, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the style of the conventions of the International Maritime Organization that provides a holistic and comprehensive regulatory framework for the management, protection, and sustainable utilization of tangible and intangible natural and cultural heritage through detailing the regimes for each kind of heritage and identifying the competent national authorities that will implement the particular heritage regime. Of course, the approach that we are following, especially as it relates to the International Maritime Organization conventions and best practices, is practical because in one instrument, an entire framework is built out, despite varying entities and authorities may be responsible for executing or implementing specific activities within the framework. So effectively, the Maritime and Underwater Heritage Bill provides a holistic framework for all components of maritime heritage, and that is important for the future development of the country. The same legislative design which was undertaken in the Merchant Shipping Maritime Marriages Act with respect to the designation of the persons or the ministries responsible in the legislative framework within the Merchant Shipping Maritime Marriage Act. That was, even though designated on the auspices of the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport, but for practical purposes, it was obviously going to be administered by the marriage section of the Ministry of Home Affairs. The legislative design of the bill also serves to improve business and service excellence in Barbados, consolidating into one law the various kinds of maritime heritage and identify that one law that the relevant entities responsible for the regulation of a particular kind of maritime heritage, thereby making it easier for locals, visitors, and other persons with commercial interests. Of course, the bill is also aimed to operate as a one-stop shop for all maritime heritage. It is important that we pursue this path because it is absolutely necessary that we have a one-stop operation to facilitate the advancement of any marine and underwater activities within our territorial waters. The key features of the Maritime Underwater Heritage Bill, it speaks to coastal state regulation of maritime heritage activities. It also speaks to heritage falling under the purview of the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport, but it has its foundation effectively in the merchant shipping suite of laws I have already made reference to those laws, the fact that we came here on some previous occasions to address the issue of all of those related laws. The Maritime and Underwater Heritage Bill comprises 7 parts, and it contains 243 provisions and 4 schedules. Part 1, if I may go through the clauses of the bill. In Part 1, setting out from 1 to 6, it outlines clearly preliminary matters in respect of the bill. Those are found at page 35. Clause 4 in particular outlines the preliminary matters in respect to the executing activities required under this legislation, and the principles are not limited to, but of course ensuring the sustainable use of maritime resources for the benefit of both existing and future generations. It talks about promoting fair and equitable benefit sharing. It talks about encouraging sustainability by development of heritage resources, protecting and recognizing the rights of civil society, local coastal and fishing communities, and local people. It speaks about facilitating effective participation in maritime and underwater heritage management, promoting sustainable utilization of marine resources, enforcing the principle that the polluter pays by ensuring that the persons who cause the pollution, that they obviously have a right to pay. And it also speaks to taking a precautionary approach, ensuring that Barbados' maritime genetic resources and biodiversity within Barbados are protected, irrespective of the status of science on those resources. And I felt it necessary to go through those sections because it speaks to the embodiment of what we continue to focus on and to give force to into law. As I said, the UNESCO Convention on the Protection of Underwater Cultural Heritage 2001 Convention, and the 2003 Convention on the Convention for Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage. Of course, these are critical matters, and in this piece of legislation that we are bringing today, which is almost more than 265 pages, sets out the broad regulatory framework as I indicated. Of course, it is important that we recognize, and if you go to Clause 9, which is important, Clause 9 speaks to the whole issue of sustainable tourism practices, and of course, the bill would require persons to engage in tourism-related activities directed at maritime heritage to promote responsible maritime heritage practices that will minimize marine environmental damage and reduce the carbon footprint. Of course, it will positively connect people and nature through sustainable tourism, and of course, encourage solidarity through tourism by undertaking a number of activities aimed at helping local coastal and maritime communities. Clause 10 of the bill on page 38 sets out the establishment for a maritime heritage tourism development program. And of course, that is for the coordination and facilitation of national maritime heritage activities within the cultural and heritage domains. Of course, that is important, and they're all cited at 10. It talks about the program, it goes at 10, clause 10.2, it details the program, how it shall operate, how it shall be cooperated, and it goes right through to G, all the way down to G, section 5. Clause 11, of course, speaks to the Maritime Heritage Development Plan, and that is critical because the Ministry of Tourism will be responsible not only for the development of the tourism plan, but also for the implementation of the Maritime Heritage and Tourism Development Program. And that's set out at Clause 11 of the bill for ease of reference for members. By protecting and properly managing maritime heritage, we are safeguarding, of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, our cultural identity. We want to enhance ocean literacy, and we want to harness the deriving benefits such from tourism activities directed at the maritime heritage. Shipwrecks, maritime sites, and underwater relics give valuable insights into a nation's past, and of course, maritime heritage protection, preservation, and exploration attract tourists, create livelihood and entrepreneurial opportunities for the overall economic benefit of the country. The maritime heritage economy also has the opportunity and potential to enhance the day-to-day living experiences of locals to ensure that I apologize, Madam Deputy Speaker, I thought this was on silent. And it also sets out to protect the future of maritime tourism and, of course, introduce a new niche market. Of course, why am I saying all of this? It is necessary because as we continue to build out a tourism industry in Barbados with all of its subsectors, the one important but critical niche that more and more visitors are coming to a destination is to explore heritage tourism. And with this in mind, the maritime heritage economy has great potential, as we have seen, but we can build it out and even develop it further as we continue our expansion. I'm told that, in the words of Caroline Tippett, who's the Vice President of Ocean Markets and Finance for the World Wildlife Fund, it says that nature is the most important business for tourism, as the industry's long and wide supply chain depend on beautiful destinations for their long-term health. Madam Deputy Speaker, perhaps you were speaking of Barbados, because we all know very well in this country that we enjoy a significant repeat guest factor, depending on which market you're looking at. Certainly from Canada, UK, and the United States, there's several persons who come back to Barbados time and time again, and they do so because of what we have to offer. But as we obviously continue to drive tourism in the right direction, we are also seeking to build out heritage tourism, which is a significant niche. Of course, there's a lot of heritage in Barbados. We have a number of designated World Heritage Sites, and as we continue to expand and develop our heritage tourism, this will add a new niche. But specifically as it relates to maritime, it would also give us an opportunity for the maritime sector to be built out further and to create those unique visitor experiences. Of course, we are mindful that we have to manage it, and therefore it is important that we manage it in such a way that we do not destroy the ecosystem. And that is why the ministry took the time and went in diligently as they worked to go into a number of bills to bring to this honorable chamber along with the CPC to ensure that we not only protect, but we also enhance Barbados' standing within the maritime sector. Clause 12 of the bill speaks to the duties of the Barbados Maritime Transport Administration. Of course, that administration was established pursuant to Section 7 of the Shipping Domestic Vessel Act 2024, and that clearly sits within the ministry, but within the section responsible for shipping. And under this maritime heritage and underwater bill, the administration responsible for regulating vessels and maritime heritage activities and other activities under the legislation, collaborating with relevant ministries, departments, and agencies involved in maritime heritage activities, and of course, ensuring that vessels engaged in maritime heritage activities comply with the applicable national and international maritime laws. Madam Deputy Speaker, when you don't have laws in place, it can become open season for people who believe they can do what they want to do. And of course, the maritime sector is one that we have to manage very carefully. And therefore, this bill tightens those controls and make it very clear to all and sundry who would want to come through Barbados' territorial waters and those just outside of our territorial waters, make them compliant with the law. At the same time, giving the assurance to the International Maritime Organization that Barbados, as a signatory to the convention, complies with the conventions as well as best practices outlined, and that we also follow through and make sure that we conform to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Part 3 of the bill, that's on page 49, speaks to the tangible maritime heritage in the form of lighthouses and historic vessels. Of course, we all know that lighthouses remain a long-standing symbol of maritime safety, going way back. Of course, the international maritime community today still recognizes the value and the benefit of having lighthouses. Of course, there's some lighthouses when they are no longer operational, become opportunities for us to engage in heritage tourism. They become recognized as significant symbols for a country, and obviously significant symbols in respect to the maritime history and legacy and of course heritage in the country. And therefore, by ensuring that this section, the heritage lighthouses, manages that we have a section in the bill applying to that section, will also, as it sets out at 22 in terms of purposes, it will set out the purposes required to protect and conserve lighthouses. And that, I think, is a significant benefit for us. As I indicated, there are several persons when they visit a country would ensure that they go and visit lighthouses included by other maritime heritage. And therefore, it is recognized that within the bill that we had to pay homage, as it were, to the issue of the heritage lighthouses in Barbados. Clause 22, as I indicated, speaks to all the purpose, speaks to the purposes of the part as it relates to providing for lighthouses and the maintenance of such. Clause 23, designation as heritage lighthouses within the Act. 23 empowers the minister responsible for shipping to, in consultation with the relevant agencies and other stakeholders, designate a lighthouse to be a heritage lighthouse where the lighthouse is of historic and continued importance as an aid to navigation and safe voyaging of vessels, and that the lighthouse serves as the traditional representation of hope and guidance to generations to come. I should also note that at page clause 24, the protection and alteration of heritage lighthouses, it makes it very clear that we have to protect those houses. At clause 26, it talks about demolition of a heritage lighthouse. It says a heritage lighthouse or any part of it shall be demolished if there is no reasonable alternative to its preservation, and B, a notice is published at least 90 days before the demolition in one or more newspapers of general circulation in the area in which the lighthouse is situated. And of course, again, this is not only Barbados' law, but this is in keeping with the IMO generally recommended principles and conventions. Clauses 27 through to 29 addresses the whole issue of the Barbados Historic Vessels Registry Program. It talks about the register and how it works, and it also talks about the restoration of vessels. Of course, this is very important for the jurisdiction. The Barbados program will be managed by the Barbados Maritime and Transport Administration in consultation with the Barbados Museum and Historical Society. So you can see, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is not only a one-stop shop as it relates to the ministry. The ministry obviously will have to have discussions with the museum and to ensure that we classify these programs of heritage within a very defined but dedicated standard. Clauses 30 through to 69 of the bill provides for the maritime cultural heritage in the form of marine-specific traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions associated with the sea maritime heritage and, of course, marine genetics recourse. Of course, in relation to the maritime genetic resources, local coastal and fishing communities hold knowledge associated with such resources upon which they can create inventions Of course, they're based on the marine genetic resource having practical applications, including the field of medicine and marine biotechnology. Collectively, I must also add that the maritime cultural and natural heritage is not only important to promoting better heritage and management practices, but also strengthening the linkages between tourism, fisheries, and maritime conservation. It should be noted that Clause 2C of the bill requires the Tourism Ministry to promote the protection and sustainable utilization of maritime heritage assets in the interests of maritime heritage tourism development in order to advance Barbados's maritime heritage economy. And therefore, the ministry will be collaborating with the ministry responsible for fisheries to ensure that coastal communities, including small ships and operators and other persons involved in the recreational marine community, as well as the fisher folk, that they can obtain maximum benefits from the gains to be derived from this bill. The Part 5 on page 87, clauses 70 right through to 101, the bill incorporates the tangible maritime cultural heritage regime enshrined in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and the UNESCO Convention for the Protection of Underwater Heritage. It is important that we continue to ensure that all relics, treasures, and objects of prehistoric character, that they remain protected, and that you don't have persons coming into your territorial waters and obviously removing items that they ought not to do. And therefore, the protection is there for all and see in the for all to see within the law once it is cleared once this bill passes both houses. The other issue relates to the bill at clause 69, which it also gives the customs the authority to inspect and verify any marine genetic resource and marine biotechnological products being exported from Barbados as part of the regulating exploration and also the kind of marine natural heritage that we want to preserve. So it gives the customs full authority to ensure that they manage aspects of this bill, and that is contained, like I said, at clause 69. At clause 186 of the bill, it also regulates exportation of natural heritage in the form of ocean materials, deep sea natural heritage, as ocean minerals are classified, discovered in Barbados's waters, of course, cannot be exported except in accordance with this legislation. The work that we've done recently on the merchant shipping, wreck discoveries, and sunken military craft regulations, which are connected to salvage and wreck regime in the parent Merchant Shipping Act, provides for the protection of historic shipwrecks in Barbados, and certainly Barbados's waters, from unauthorized salvors and treasure hunters. The protection of recent shipwrecks are classified as culturally or scientifically significant from unauthorized persons, protection and preservation from unauthorized disturbance of all sunken military craft, the proper management of authorized evacuations of shipwreck discoveries, the protection of underwater cultural heritage in the form of shipwrecks. And those are all vested within that piece of legislation that passed through this honorable chamber. In relation to the part 6, page 104, again, we have to stress the point that the bill implements the mineral regime enshrined under Part 11 of the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, which is the common heritage of mankind. And therefore, we have to ensure that our area within the international seabed, as managed by the International Seabed Authority established under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, ensuring that all developments contain respect to coastal activities are enshrined within the law. I've spoken to the issue of the merchant shipping suite, so I'm not going to delay the House unduly with that aspect. Suffice to say that it is important that we look at the other issues relating to the bill. And clause 182 of the bill provides and promotes local processing of ocean materials. However, it allows processing of these said materials in another country where there's no appropriate ocean mineral processing facilities available in Barbados, or B, if it is not economically feasible to process ocean minerals in Barbados. So again, we have moved with dispatch to ensure that we protect Barbados's processing of items, whether here or elsewhere, and that we don't lose out on those opportunities. Of course, the bill in summing up, Section 6 also speaks to green transport, and we all know that green transport depends on the success of deep sea mining, and this includes the green shipping sector and the transition to energy efficient transport, including maritime transport, necessitate technologies such as batteries, and these batteries rely on minerals from the ocean such as copper, magnesium, and nickel. The greening the transport sectors will lead to an increase in the world's demand for precious metals, given the mineral intensity of green transitioning, and these precious metals are more abundant in deep sea than on land. And therefore, with this bill, it protects Barbados's not only good reputation, but it also ensures that people don't come into our waters, do as they please, and then leave and cause a problem. So that is one fundamental clause built in, or clauses, I should, built into this bill to protect Barbados's future as we move to greening and a green transport mechanism. Of course, a fundamental tenet of the Maritime Underwater Heritage Bill, like I said, is to protect, preserve, and sustainably manage and utilize all of our natural and cultural heritage in various forms, and therefore port state control is absolutely necessary in these matters, and therefore it is critical that we continue to bring the kinds of legislation that we are bringing to this honorable chamber to protect Barbados's marine infrastructure and, of course, our coastlines. The bill at clause 26 on page 204 gives the minister, empowers the minister responsible for tourism to make regulations for the sustainable development of the maritime heritage and tourism sector. That's on page 204. Regulations made by the minister responsible for tourism at 236. And of course, at 237, it sets out that the minister responsible for shipping may make regulations for the following. A, the safety, security, maritime labor safety, marine pollution prevention, and management respect of vessels engaged in maritime heritage activities, and B, generally for the purpose of giving effect to this act. So those are set out very clearly at page 205. On page 206, clause 239, it speaks to the minister being responsible for underwater cultural heritage, which may make regulations, and it sets out the forms, fees, matters relating to underwater cultural heritage, and of course, generally for the purpose of giving effect to the bill. And it also sets out, for clarity, the regulations by the minister responsible for natural resources at clause 240. Now, this bill, as I indicated, empowers the minister responsible for natural resources to make regulations relating to all ocean mineral activities, including ocean within Barbados's waters, and of course, ocean mineral activities beyond Barbados's waters in the area under Barbados's sponsorship. So that's very, very important because this bill obviously brings the coherence in terms of coastal state control activities directed at maritime heritage while simultaneously enabling improvements in business and service excellence in Barbados. And that, for us, is of great concern. The bill, as I indicated, comprises of 4 schedules, and those are so noted within the bill, and it also includes all those matters relating to the United Nations Convention Law, the seal, like I said, for which Barbados is a party. The Maritime, Underwater, and Heritage Bill, once enacted, will bring significant benefits to Barbados, including connecting tourism to maritime cultural and heritage. It will also enhance the services of the Barbados Ship Registry through providing for the establishment of a national historic ships registry. This is something that other countries do, and therefore it is important that we follow through on our heritage, but at the same time, encourage others who want to do business with Barbados to do so. This bill will also continue to place Barbados at the forefront of actions that support United Nations Decade on the Ocean of Science for Sustainability, that of course from 2021 to 2030, and this initiative will support countries' efforts to reverse the cycle of decline in the ocean health due to climate change, and will also help to galvanize ocean stakeholders behind a common framework that will lead to improved conditions for sustainable development of the ocean. Of course, it will also enable the commercialization of marine-specific traditional knowledge, which is oftentimes undervalued, but it will also offer new non-traditional economic opportunities for Barbados' economy. The bill also is testament to the fact that we recognize the importance of the Admiralty and the maritime law to not only conventional shipping and trade activities, but also to ocean-based activities supported by shipping, how shipping industry is intimately connected with maritime heritage, how the tourism industry can enhance its maritime heritage platform, and of course, advance other but more diverse forms of economic activity for the country. And it basically sets out how the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport can support and facilitate development and in other sectors directly or indirectly. The bill, once enacted, will join the family of legislation created to correct the legislative-related deficiencies identified in the International Maritime Organization's audit. In this instance, from the viewpoint of putting adequate legislation in place for the collaborative regulation of coastal state control activities. Of course, I must, for the record, again, remind the Honourable Chamber that Barbados, and I would have come to this Honourable Chamber and piloted the facilitation of International Maritime Traffic Act that was enacted on February 12th of this year, and that was obviously an act set out to simplify the documentary processes relating to ships, to expedite clearances of vessels, passengers, and the overall efficiency of ships at ship-port interface. The Domestic Vessels Act, which was enacted on July the 26th of this year, again, that was to regulate in accordance with the minimum standards set up by the IMO for small vessels of 150 gross tons and below. We also had the Maritime Transport Emissions Control Act, which was enacted on August the 29th of this year to prevent, reduce, and control atmospheric pollution by ships. And of course, just less than 2 months ago, 6 weeks or so ago, we had in this very house, in fact, the Merchant Shipping Suite of Laws, set of laws would have been passed, I believe, is October the 29th, and we also had it passed in the Senate chamber. I believe it was November the 8th. And again, the Heritage Bill will provide the legal infrastructure for activities at intersections of shipping within the maritime heritage tourism sector. We are obviously going to continue to work on building out this capacity and it will also enable Barbados to effectively capture and sustainably utilize the cultural and natural wealth embodied in the tangible and in the non-tangible ocean-based heritage. Madam Deputy Speaker, I also want to emphasize that we are not wholly dependent, but largely dependent on tourism. And therefore, if we continue to be dependent, we will have from time to time to have attractions. And from time to time, we will have to look for new sources of income, not only from tourism, but from the maritime sector. And clearly the maritime sector is one that once we can get all of our legislative framework in place, it will certainly continue to build out opportunities, indeed financial opportunities. And you recall when the last occasion when I spoke in this chamber, I spoke about, for example, if you want to get into shipbuilding, I spoke about the finance related to maritime finance. There also there's the Barbados Registry. Again, once we have all of the necessary legislation in place, Barbados can become a very attractive place for ships to register, and therefore that comes with enhanced revenue. At the same time, it would also allow those ships who hitherto have not come to Barbados or have not registered, with the Barbados Registry to do so, recognizing that we fully support and bringing on board all of the IMO-related conventions and best practices, and that we should continue to do. I might add that in the new year, we will have the marine areas, bill brought to this chamber, along with some other legislative matters that we intend to continue our quest to build out the maritime division within not only the ministry, but certainly in Barbados. And that is a plus for us. So it is all interwoven, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the sense that we can also, whilst we build out tourism activities, generate increased earnings for tourism, we also have opportunities to drive additional economic benefits deriving from the changes that we're making and the laws that we're introducing for the maritime sector. I don't believe that I have to go much further. Of course, it is always a technical piece of legislation. I am grateful for the officers who continue to guide me, because, you know, I said so before in this honorable chamber, I'm no expert in these matters, but that the ministry is sufficiently, the ministry is sufficiently capable, and it has the human resource component there to guide us and, of course, prepare us as we go through. And therefore, there's an officer who continues to make a significant impact and impression, not only in the ministry, but on behalf of the entire Barbados. The officer assigned as the Director of Maritime Affairs, who continues to deliver on her objectives within the ministry. And I'm grateful for her and her entire department's input, because as junior officers, senior officers, and other officers who have been trained in these areas that will show the best that Barbados has to offer. And we are fortunate that we have the level of skill and the level of expertise within the ministry. I should also like to recognize the Acting Chief Technical Officer within the ministry, who continues to work very closely to align herself with the objectives and the department's objectives with the goals of the ministry in respect of these areas. And of course, when you have capable persons within your department, it is important as not only as a member of Parliament for St. Michael West Central, but as a minister responsible for the department, to obviously thank those who have been a party to and have given great service for the promotion. Of course, the Permanent Secretary who's here with us, I must also thank the Permanent Secretary for guiding, obviously, and ensuring and coordinating that we get all these matters to Parliament. They might tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I'm a hard taskmaster, but as a statement of fact. But I do so in the name of Barbados to ensure that we achieve the goals that we set out, and that Barbados continues to build out the maritime sector. And now that we're twinning with respect to the Maritime and Underwater Heritage Bill, that we have an opportunity to twin both, but at the same time drive the economic activity and benefits, while at the same time ensure that we are aligned with all the IMO related conventions and that we are aligned to ensure that we structure Barbados's maritime sector in a way that will allow persons to continue to do business with us. I also want to thank the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel within the Attorney General's office. I must tell you, when I look at the voluminous nature of bills coming to this House in respect of the Maritime Division, I must tell you that it takes a very special and fine brain to process and draft all these related issues, albeit that some are related to conventions that we have, but then to interlock them and put them into one piece of legislation, I really have to salute the officers within CPC for all of their hard work. It's never an easy task when you have to pull together. Drafting is a specialist area. I don't know much about it. Suffice to say that in my very youthful journey as a minister, I have to come to appreciate all the hard work that they do within that department, and therefore I want to thank all of the officers. This bill alone, I think it contains 268 pages actually, and on the last occasion in October when we were here dealing with the shipping legislation, that bill was in excess of 1,000 pages, and not only not in bold print, I may add, but in fine print, and therefore it tells you the voluminous nature of the work that they have to undertake within CPC. So I have to express on the floor our thanks to all of the officers involved in this respect. Of course, as I mentioned, we have some other legislative matters to address. We will be bringing those in the new year, including Marines Areas Bill, and there's some other bills that we have to bring here in respect of maritime. But I give the House the assurance that we will continue to work diligently on behalf of the country to ensure that we have legislation that is fit for purpose, legislation that would allow us to continue to advance within the maritime space, the initiatives and the activities. I'm following through on all of these activities, and I'm sure that you will hear more about it later when we come to the estimates debate, the clear path and why is it that we're continuing on this path of developing the maritime sector. Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't think there's much more that I can add. I believe I would be speaking close to an hour, and therefore I believe that the bill in all of its objects and reasons set out what we're about, and I would like to move at this stage the second reading of the bill. I'm obliged to you, Madam Deputy Chair.
Honourable Member for Christ yourself and Leader of the Opposition.
Yes. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. If I did pause, I was waiting for the Honourable Member for Christchurch West to take his seat. I wasn't sure whether he was leaving or if he was staying, and happily he's staying to join his colleagues who were present, all 5 of them.
Honourable Member, I did not go far in school, but I can count. Sir, will you please perform your duties so that we can continue the discussion
the
on this
Honourable
very
Member
important
for
bill?
Christchurch West is insisting that I am in breach of some standing order, let him say which standing order. And let him say...
Sir, I've given you the floor that you can respond to the Honourable Member of Tourism's matter and order paper number 10, please.
And you will notice, ma'am, that I sit whenever I'm interrupted by another speaker, in keeping with the standing orders.
Order number 10, sir. Order number 10, sir. I eagerly
May-
await
may I
your
proceed,
contribution.
ma'am?
We eagerly await your contribution, sir.
You eagerly await it, yes.
Kindly.
And I'm eager
Kindly.
to give my response as well.
I can tell you're in a Christmas mood, but we can celebrate after. Or that-
No, I'm not in celebratory mood. I have a few things to say which will not be consistent with any celebration.
once they are in keeping with the standards
yes.
of this honorable chamber, sir,
Oh, yes.
go
Oh,
right
yes.
ahead.
They are in keeping with the standing orders. And I beg your pardon?
Don't mind this aside, sir, please. Let
Now,
us,
for the experts on the standing orders, Standing Order 33, Sub-Rule 6, says that I should be heard in silence unless you interrupt me, ma'am. So for the absent expert, when he comes, he will relate that rule to the chair, to Your Honor. Now, as to what has come before the Parliament this morning, I want to assure the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central that I don't regard his business here ever as anything other than sober. And indeed, before he sat, he told this chamber that it is a technical piece of legislation. Of course, if it is technical, it requires sobriety, and he is well qualified in the art of sobriety. Whenever he comes, that is his nature. It's very sober. It is not also to say that it is soporific, because I want to assure him, the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central and the Minister of Tourism, that I never meet his sober presentations with somnolence, so that I listen to everything he says, and as I always say, I take notes, and that was one of the many notes that I took. I would want to assure him that I do admire his modesty. It is rare to find a minister of government saying, and I quote, "I am no expert in these matters," and then he defers to his permanent secretary and his technical staff that he brings here, much unlike many of his colleagues who come here with a rather different approach. So I want to express admiration to the Honourable Member for the manner in which he visits this Honourable Chamber. And as I said earlier, he spoke to an audience. If I speak for myself, I will assure him that I listened to every word and that nothing that he said met with any somnolence on my part. I, of course, am unable to speak for his cabinet colleagues, all of them who are present, all 5 of them who are present. I cannot speak for them. I know that this is obviously a very busy government and that he enjoys the luxury only of some of his cabinet colleagues today, but I want to assure him again that he had my rapt attention. I do, however, want to, on behalf of the people of Barbados and the people who are interested in the marine environment, I want to ask him, not necessarily today, but in future, to produce for the people of Barbados a report card on the state of our marine environment. And it is not a heavy task. There are just a few areas in which we are obliged to speak for and on behalf of those who are interested in this precious marine environment. We want to know what is the state of the reefs which were reportedly damaged by the cruise ships during COVID. A former minister did tell this country that we were an extremely hospitable jurisdiction and that we allowed those cruise liners to berth within our territorial waters, in fact, very close to the coastline. And we did hear in the aftermath of that most hospitable act that certain discharge from those cruise ships
may have damaged reefs that took perhaps thousands of years to grow. The country was also visited with the disclosure from the honourable member's predecessor in that office that those cruise liners would reward us with future visits. And not everyone who lives in Barbados is so naive as to believe that a cruise ship is going to come back here because it was allowed to berth off the shore. Not everybody is that naive, but that may be to digress. What this country wants to know, what the fishermen want to know, what those who operate pleasure craft want to know, they want to know what is the state of the reefs off the coast, immediately off the coast of Barbados. That is we heard the word heritage quite a lot in here this morning, and that is a part of this country's heritage. You may not know, you're from a central parish, Your Honor, and you know very little about coastal activity. And since I know you do not know, I will remind you that there was something called a black coral industry. And you tend to be rather bejeweled, but I've never seen you in black coral, so that I confidently assert that you don't know that there was something called a black coral industry. And it was a very thriving industry back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I think it went as far as the 90s, but it did not. That industry, I don't believe, depleted the coral as much as those grateful cruise ships may have done. So that the honourable member for St. Michael West Central is always so kind and sober as to receive from his technical people a report as to what happened to our coral reefs in the aftermath of famous hospitality by his predecessor in office. We are told as well, we can place a second report on this report card, a second item on this report card. The country will probably wish to inquire of the Honourable Minister as to possible damage to reefs on the West Coast. Reports are coming to us that there is work going on that coast, needed work to replenish the beachlands, the beaches, except that the government will want to ensure that that work, that heavy work, is done in a manner that protects our precious reefs off the West Coast. We know that diving, pleasure diving, is an important part of heritage tourism, and it is a part of our heritage tourism that will disappear if we, at the same time, destroy the reefs off the West Coast. So that I know this minister is very diligent and industrious, and he will seek from his technical people a report on the state of the reefs off the West Coast in the aftermath, and as a result of the heavy work going on there, he will seek, the honourable member will seek that report and come back to this chamber and tell the people of Barbados what is the state of the West Coast, and more particularly, what is the state of the reef population of the West Coast as a consequence, or as a result, I beg your pardon, of the heavy work that may be going on there. I drive through Bridgetown every morning, including this morning, and in spite of the decline of our major thoroughfare, Broad Street, I love to drive across the bridge. I think it's called the Chamberlain Bridge, and to look left and to look right and to admire the work that was done some years ago on the inner basin that travels now as far as the globe. I really do admire it. That is one of the pleasures of a journey through Bridgetown. And I confess personally that I do look forward to the other work that is presently going on the Pierhead, that it will constitute of central Bridgetown a literal bridgehead that will beautify the city. And after that, perhaps the government will commit itself to some urban renewal and attained to Broad Street, which is no longer the Broad Street that you and I knew when we were little children coming to do the window shopping at this joyous time of year. Broad Street is in such serious decline that some of the stores have lost the right to sell certain prestigious commodities because the street is no longer what it used to be. It is no longer as attractive as it used to be. And every Barbadian, young and old, wanted to make that visit to Broad Street at this festive time of year. This government now, unhappily, is presiding over the decline of a major part of our heritage, which adjoins the coastline, the marine areas of Bridgetown. Indeed, it is called Bridgetown. But while admiring the work and being expectant and happily expectant of the work that is going on the Pierhead, we want to pause and ask the Honourable Minister to give this country a report card on the state of the ancient graves. I'm told that it is an ancient grave site in the vicinity of that work that is going on, and we would want to, the country, those of us interested in heritage, and those not interested in heritage do have an interest in the preservation of our ancient sites, and we are told that there's an ancient grave site in the vicinity of that work that is going on, to which we all happily look forward. It really will make Bridgetown a beautiful place again. And we want to be certain that there's preservation. If there's that grave site there, that ancient grave site, we want to be absolutely certain that that site will be preserved and indeed will be incorporated into the work that is being done there as a place of some historical interest. We would travel further south and extend that ministerial report card to the planned marina that was to be done in the swamp, because everybody in this country is entitled to representation, and even the people in St. Lawrence are entitled to have continued representation as to government's plans for that area. Please do not accuse me of digressing, Your Honor, if I say that it was an unhappy period in the lives of people along that coast when they read in the newspaper that their lands would have been acquired by government. I don't think they were told by any telephone call from the ministry. I think Housing and Lands in this regard. A neighbor saw it in the newspaper and told another neighbor, and word went around that the sword of Damocles was swinging over the people of St. Lawrence and Dover, and that their lands were to be acquired, and that the acquisition of those lands was related to a governmental enterprise to place a marina in a swamp. And those who are environmentalists were shocked. They were appalled that such a plan could have been hatched to destroy a wetland for the sake of a marina. Now, the government has never officially told the people there what has happened to the plan. If the plan had gone through, of course, the shelf, the coral shelf that lies in that lagoon off St. Lawrence would necessarily have had to have been dug up. So that a minister a few years ago used the term environmental madness. That would have been an entire mental asylum if it had been done of that, rather than environmental madness. That would have been an entire asylum. I don't know how you could have destroyed that area to have boats come in to a swamp. And I was told by the experts at the time, not many, 4 or 5 years ago, that you could not carry seawater into that area, into that wetland, because that wetland had fresh water seeping from its subsoil, and therefore you could not mix seawater with the fresh water. You would have destroyed the entire area. Government, however, has not officially said what is its position. We know that the plans were started. We know that the land acquisitions were started. We know that the entire back page of one of the local newspapers carried a large article which spoke of the plan in some detail. All that hopefully is behind us, but this offers the government an opportunity to say whether that project is well and truly behind us. Welcome. To say whether, welcome. To say whether that, this is the spirit of the season, ma'am. Seems to be a revolving door anyhow. You know, this minister who spoke this morning is really entitled to address on matters as serious as this. He's entitled, a good minister of tourism is entitled to address a large body of his colleagues here, but I leave that alone. Let us get back to the legislation.
Honourable member, you are reflecting on what is happening here. We have got a quorum, and we are listening to you attentively as usual. Go right ahead, sir.
I'm obliged to you, ma'am.
Do not reflect on anything else,
Don't.
unless it is.
Yes, we do have a quorum.
It is not a breach. Please continue.
It is not a breach.
Please continue, sir. I'm listening.
I'm relieved to hear you give that ruling, because
Always I
there's some
listen.
experts around
Always
here
I
who
listen.
tell me that I can't yearn for the presence of my parliamentary colleagues. I yearn for their presence. I do yearn for their presence. I love to see them here in abundant numbers. But mine now is a lament.
Sir?
But you will permit me to go on. There's another member speaking.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please continue, because we all have histories of being present and not present. So let us keep focused what's happening currently before I too reflect on some challenges that we know have been in existence for quite a few years with others. Sir, can we go ahead? Thank you. You were listening carefully.
Yes, ma'am.
To
Let
your
us acknowledge the spirit of the season.
We need to, but if you're reflecting on other members' movements and the activities and so that are not impacting on the important business of this honorable chamber, I would rather you, sir, stick to the discussion.
Yes.
And let us go forward in faith and in unity at this time of the Christmas season.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
And it was in the spirit of that season that I was yearning. And so we were seeking to guarantee the rights of those who live in St. Lawrence, and to guarantee them, or to guarantee to them, that their lives will not be disturbed by a very ambitious government that wanted to put seawater in their yard. But I do admire the modesty and the sobriety of he who presented, the honorable member who presented this morning. So that is the extent of the report card. It could be longer. The honorable member spoke for less than an hour. which is really a short speech when one considers the length of the legislation. All right. I shan't be distracted, Your Honor. I will not be distracted. Beg your pardon? Happily, I'm joined in my concerns by the Honourable Member for Christchurch West. He too, I know good people, and he is as concerned as I am. He is telling me that when I count the heads, how I should count them. Yes. I'm yearning. Well, he urges me to touch the bill. Here comes the bill.
I do urge you as well.
The objects and reasons. At the urging of the Honourable Member for Christchurch West. Under objects and reasons, we read at A, that this bill would provide for the protection, management, sustainable development, and regulation of maritime and underwater heritage in Barbados. That is the one that takes priority. Again, I say to the minister, we respect that. I mean, who will challenge, who living in this country for all of his or her adult life would challenge a bill that has that as its prior objective? The protection, management, sustainable development, and regulation of maritime and underwater heritage in Barbados. No Barbadian challenges that objective. And therefore, when the Honourable Member describes himself as an amateur in relation to technical matters, we applaud his modesty. But then we will take him, the Honourable Member, we will take him to D. Let us read B so that there is some chronology and so that there is some hierarchy of importance. A says that the bill provides for the protection, management, sustainable development, and regulation of maritime and underwater heritage in Barbados. B, the advancement of sustainable maritime heritage tourism. C, the regulation of vessels engaged in maritime heritage activities. Who in their right mind will challenge that? No one in Barbados challenges those noble objectives and reasons behind this bill. However, ma'am, we come to D. And it reads, this bill would provide for the recognition and protection of traditional cultural expressions associated with the sea and marine-specific traditional knowledge which are held by fishing communities and coastal communities in Barbados. Now, it is at that point that we may depart from the mission of this government. I've confessed that we associate ourselves with the other noble objectives, but this is part of the noble objective of this legislation. I beg leave of the Honourable Minister who presented to depart from any association with the object that seeks to recognize and protect cultural expressions associated with the sea in regard to fishing communities. I have said, and I speak with authority on this, since I've had direct contact with the fisher folk. I've had direct contact with the fishing community of this country. The country knows that we held 2 media conferences in their presence with their abundant numbers, and they're very unhappy. And they're unhappy because they believe that the government is failing to recognize them. We all know what happened a few months ago with the Hurricane Beryl. We all know that 90% of the industry was destroyed. We know that. This country knows that. And this country knows that this government made a promise to the fishing industry that the government would do all that it can do, not only to restore the industry, so that it may, in the words of this legislation, culturally express itself, but this government offered to restore the very day-to-day lives of the members of that fishing community. And I will give details. This government promised the fishing industry that it would pay the sum of $1,500 per month for 3 months, September, October, and November, so that their lives would find dignity, so that they and their families could survive. And we are not doing this to repeat a sad story. We are doing this because the sad story that has become their life is persisting. And it becomes my duty as leader of the opposition in this country to reflect the views and the needs of these persons. They're real people who have real bills and real children and real house rents and real mortgages. And they make, or they desire to make, real trips to the supermarket. But the view apparently is that this country's life may continue in spite of the suffering of people. And if there's one fisherman or one vendor suffering, my voice has to be heard in here. Their plight will not be and must not be neglected in here. And I'm asking this compassionate government, I'm asking them to pay some attention to the promise that was made months ago to the members of that community. And this is not political intervention. This is a matter of human rights. That in the first instance they were promised 3 months, a payment of $1,500 per month over a 3-month period. Some have received it. On what basis, we don't know. Is the government discriminating politically? We don't know. Some have been promised and have not received anything. Let this voice be the voice that represents those who suffer from government's dereliction in its duty to pay them. It is not a lot of money when one considers how much money this government has, and another piece of legislation may well visit this chamber at some point, which will involve millions of dollars in concessions, millions. Cannot this country pause to concede? A widow's mite, MITE, in concession to people who suffer? Must I say this? Must I invent another language in which to say this? Pay the people the money you promised them. If it is a moral obligation, so be it. Moral obligations do have weight. We have not come here to argue legal obligations, although on the matter of law, we still state our position to be that they were lured into an unsafe territory, that those boats were lured by government's promises into unsafe territory. But we are not arguing the law this morning. We are arguing morality and decency. And we are saying that if the government claims to be compassionate, please, can government find it possible to pay the people? Can government find it possible to stop making excuses that some machine has broken down? We don't all live glamorous lives. We're not all high-powered executives. There are some people out there, a large number of people who struggle from day to day to day, to use the cliche, to make ends meet, and sometimes it is a literal end that is to be met. And they've reached the end of their tether. And if, in the words of this legislation, they are to express themselves culturally as members of a fishing community, have some respect, government, and have some regard for the pleas that are uttered in government's direction. There are many of them who have not received a payment. Please, government, please pay the people. Today is the 10th of December, I believe. We are 15 days away from what we want to call the festive season, a day of the height of the festivity, Christmas Day. And we have people in this country who have not committed any crime. They haven't done any wrong. They just put their boats in a confined area, had the boat and the industry destroyed. That's all they did, at the invitation of government. And recently a minister confessed that they knew the severity of the event. They knew what the severity of the event would have been well in advance of its occurrence, because they sent out marine surveillance equipment. And that minister said they knew that the waves would be high well in advance of the event. It's there. There's a video of it. I think the term he uses, autonauts. We had autonauts, and those autonauts had satellite connection. And therefore we knew. It's there, honorable member. It's there. I'm going to send the video to somebody who knows you, and he will send it to you. So that if we want to argue law, we will argue law. But today we do not come on the basis of law. In this spirit of the season, we come asking the government to exercise itself morally and to pay those monies that are owed. I am in constant and daily touch with several of them. They have been calling the opposition office. They've been visiting the opposition office. They've been calling and visiting the opposition office as often as they have been visiting fisheries. They have been, and I wish that I could make this plea to larger numbers. But even to these depleted numbers, I ask those who are present to send a message, to send a message to the entire government. Yes, ma'am, I must do this. I know it's a busy government, but spend some of that time attending to the small people. That's what the government needs to do. Spend some time attending to the small people in this country. We've had, last week one of them told me that he went to the fisheries department, and on each occasion he goes, there's a different story. A letter came out from fisheries, and that letter said, we are no longer paying 3 months, or we are no longer making 3 payments of $1,500 per month. We are now making 1 payment, a one-off payment of $1,500. This is how you treat people. The same government that is giving massive, hefty concessions.
On a point of order, Madam
Yes,
Secretary.
I beg your pardon.
On a point of order, please. The decision was made that owners, the owners of fishing boats, the captains and crew of those fishing boats would receive, the owners, $2,000 a month for 3 months. The captain, $1,500 a month for 3 months. And the crew members of the same vessel, $1,500 a month for 3 months. The one-off payment that the member of parliament for Christchurch South and the opposition leader is referring to is the one-off payment for the fish vendors where government decided afterwards that they were going to give the vendors a one-off payment, each vendor $1,500. So I just want to clarify that that was this position, the stated position from the inception.
What of elucidation is?
I'm obliged to the honourable member for Christchurch West Central. This is what a good parliament is about. That you come and you speak on behalf of the people, and a good parliamentarian on the government side will clarify. And I am obliged to the honourable member for Christchurch West Central for being a light in the midst of darkness. Beg your pardon?
Honourable, please address the
Yeah, well,
do not mind the aside, sir.
No, I have to mind them.
Please. No, you do not have
They're
to. I will not
experts
allow
on the
it,
standing
sir.
orders.
Sir, I will not allow it. Will you please continue?
Yes,
your
and please
presentation?
ask him
I'm listening attentively.
to
and all
allow me to
understand.
continue in silence. So that when the expert on the standing orders comes, the expert will inform you, ma'am, that he's breaching Rule 33, subparagraph 6. But the expert is absent, so we don't know what that rule means, but the expert will come. I will not identify him. That's the only thing he knows in here. He only knows the standing orders, but he's absent. Yes, so I was commending the honourable member for Christchurch West Central for clarifying that it is the vendors who will receive that one-off payment. Now, I don't know, I invite the honourable member to retake his microphone and say whether those vendors had been promised 3 months. I believe they had been. I believe they had been, but they're only going to get 1 month. Again, they will not be satisfied with government's promise until they receive it. But please, will they get it before, what's the last shopping day before Christmas? The 24th? At 5 o'clock. The stores close, the supermarkets close at 2 or, look, can they get it before 2 o'clock on the 24th of December, ma'am? Did the honourable member rise and say that to you, or did he restrict it to a promise made as a comfort? And we know the rest of that saying. Is it only at the stage of a comfort? Do they think they're fools? They're not. They live real lives and they want the money. And there are hundreds of them. Some have been paid though. I don't know, we don't know if those ones who have been paid are the ones who were dancing on a right floor and sitting on right benches. We don't know. But those who did not dance on a right floor or who did not sit on the right benches, pay them as well. Pay them as well and pay them well before December the 24th. But I'm grateful for the honourable member's intervention. As I said, that is what a good parliament is about, and today we'll record that we did our duty in asking the government the question, and a minister, a dutiful minister, got out and clarified. And I am so indebted to that honourable minister, a light in the midst of darkness. They will out your candle soon anyhow. And so, Your Honour, I believe that I've done my duty to those fisher folk. And I want to say as well that some campaigns are unpopular. Some campaigns are unglamorous. And there are points at which I continue to yearn. There are points at which, let me proceed, ma'am. There are points at which it has been said, but why persist? Why persist? It seems as if government is not paying it. It seems as if the government can become accustomed to the suffering of people whom they may not regard as being important people. So why persist? But ma'am, duty, a sense of duty brings us to persistence. Because the suffering of a person anywhere, amounts to the suffering of all persons everywhere. You cannot live happily in a country where some people are unhappy. It's as simple as that. We all are entitled to some measure of happiness. And it is my duty to inform this government that the people are unhappy and they feel hard done by. And it is not multi-millions of dollars. And that is what hurts us. It is not multi-millions of dollars. And I wonder if it runs into the millions of dollars. I don't think it does. It may be in the hundreds of thousands. But what will make the people of Barbados even more disappointed is that it is a very expensive government. It must be fairly expensive to run this government, having regard to its numbers, its abundant numbers. Of course, well, I'm not going to flog that horse to death, but it is a government of abundant numbers. I leave that where it is. I've made that point often enough. And so while you have an expensive government running itself, the minister says that the vendors will receive only a one-off payment. And the Honourable Minister, in his generosity, did not also say to the people of Barbados and to those vendors why they will only receive a one-off payment. It just is the case that you're going to give one payment of $1,500 to the vendors. The captains, presumably, there was no further elucidation on that or detailed elucidation, but I came away with the impression that the captains will receive the promised 2,000, is it 2,000 per month? Beg pardon? 15 for 3 months. So that, ma'am, isn't this a beautiful place sometimes? The minister is correcting me. He is informing me. And that is good ministry. Why is he so alone in that regard? But the smallest candle can illuminate the darkest room. But I hope that they keep his candle burning. I certainly hope that it continues to burn in the midst of the encroaching darkness. Now, I was asking the question as to why they're going to give some 3 months and the others, the vendors. The minister has the opportunity to explain the rationale. We don't know. But the vendors, I say this in all seriousness, Minister, through you, Your Honor, that the vendors are also enduring a period of hardship. And this storm occurred many months ago, and they have endured for many months without any financial assistance. And you, ma'am, will permit me to go only so far with this, to make this point, that at some point, other legislation may come here which involves huge concessions, financial concessions. And I repeat that this is not a huge financial concession. And that this government now is presented with the opportunity to show how it feels about the poor among us. This government is presented with that opportunity. And being presented with that opportunity, are we visited with the very bland statement that we'll give the vendors 1 month payment, a one-off payment, and that they'll be satisfied with that, and that perhaps when January comes, they're back to square one of hardship. Can we make an appeal to this government? Can we make an appeal to this government to commit resources, enough resources, not to support them indefinitely, but to permit them some form of dignified life over the next few weeks and the next few months. I hate the three-letter word beg, but can we beg this government to do that? Can we beg this government to display compassion? Can we beg this government to display sympathy and empathy? Can we beg this government to do that? Can we beg this government to discover the humanity and the reality of the poor among us? Can we beg this government to do that? And can we beg this government to have some appreciation for the advent of the new year? That the suffering that exists now will repeat itself next year. I know this is not necessarily the business of this glamorous ministry called the Ministry of Tourism. So I depart from the Ministry of Tourism, except that he came here with a bill which refers to the cultural expressions of the fishing community, and I therefore must touch and concern, what I say must touch and concern their lives, because this bill purports to be brought here for their protection. Your Honor, the fishing community of this country is this morning, the 10th of December, without protection, without the protection that this government has promised through this bill. Yet we beg, yet we plead, yet we send an appeal to this government to increase from $1,500 as a one-off payment and accord the people some more of government's vast resources that have been committed to the expensive lifestyles of personages within the government. That's all they're asking for. That's all they're asking for, ma'am. And let us not be angry in our response. Let us acknowledge the poor among us. Not in any patronizing way, but let us acknowledge the poor among us as having rights, legal and moral. Today we appeal to moral conscience. And I know that there are men in this government with a conscience. I know that. I know that. And if it were not so, I would not have said all that I've said. But I have a duty to come here and make this appeal. And hopefully I would have made it today. So that, Your Honor, let me close by not excluding, by saying that I will not exclude the unglamorous and the rights of the unglamorous from within this parliamentary debate, that wherever I go, they are entitled to representation. And I want to say that I will represent them today. And if their moral and legal rights continue to fall into breach on the part of this government, I will repeat my pleas on their behalf. Your Honor, again I close by indicating that there's support for the noble objectives of this bill insofar as it attempts to protect our precious marine environment, or especially close to the coastline. That must be protected because, as I said, many, many Barbadians make a living as a result of that marine environment. Many of them do. It is a place of congregation for many tourists, and then there's commercial intercourse, the selling of objects and so on to the tourists by the locals. And so I must associate the glamorous with the unglamorous, and I must speak for both. And I close in saying, I speak for the legislation in terms of protecting the marine environment, and I speak for the legislation if it purports or intends to protect members of the fishing community, but I must accuse the government today of not protecting the interests of the members of the fishing community because it has failed. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that it has failed to do this. But the government has failed to protect them. And they want to wake up tomorrow morning like all of us. And they want to eat tomorrow morning like all of us. They want to have a happy Christmas like all of us. And it's less than 500 people, it's probably less than 400 people. Yes. Yes. This is a minister with a conscience, please. Please, minister. I haven't come here to engage in invective or abuse or any carping criticism. Nor ever. Yes, oh, I do criticize this government, as is my duty. You remember, you left out scrutinize. My turn. But in that spirit, in the spirit of Christmas, in spite of the shouting from the north, you hear him? You hear him, man? Man, let me wrap up, man. You want me to attack you?
Honourable member, please, you cannot speak to another member across the chamber.
You heard,
please make
you
your
heard the deputy
concluding
speaker?
remarks, sir.
He heard you?
I heard you loud and clear, and I don't think it is parliament.
You heard him as well?
Yeah, acceptable.
You didn't hear him, ma'am?
No, sir.
You didn't hear him?
Would you please conclude? We will always get a side. You've been here, member, many years. You will get a side, but we overlook them, ignore them. Would you please make your concluding remarks, sir? You've been going fairly well. Honourable members, please.
Oh, good, good. I was waiting for you to reprimand him. Good.
I'm not reprimanding anyone. I just
Good.
want for the standards of this honourable chamber to continue.
I was waiting to
And
hear
I
you
want
say
to
to them,
serve
please,
them.
and you say please. And I'm pleased
Yes, please.
that you say please
Yes,
to them.
please.
Thank you, ma'am. And so, Your Honor, my support, my general support is for the intent, but I continue to complain about the bad treatment meted out to the members of the fishing community. Your Honor, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable member for Christchurch West.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I just raise in complete support of the legislation brought by the Member of Parliament for St. Michael West Central and the Minister responsible for tourism and international transport. Madam Deputy Speaker, the importance of this piece of legislation must collide with what we as a nation promised as we acquiesce to the United Nations General Assembly called to have life as a sustainable development goal 14, life as it relates to our maritime atmosphere, that life should be realized in that environment in a way that can only add to our sustainable development. And this legislation will speak to encompass all the activities in the marine environment to ensure that the full benefits of what we call our exclusive economic zone is equally realized. And to have a bill that will seek to ensure the protection of our natural assets, our historic assets, our archaeological assets is a bill, I must say, that is ripe for a purpose. It is a bill that will pretty much determine how we will ensure the sustainable and efficient use of our marine resource. It will ensure that that which was once decommissioned in terms of our ship and our shipwrecks, that under the UNCLOS Article 303 and 149, I see some persons shaking their head who are more familiar with this legislation than myself. It will speak to how we can protect those things that will, in fact, in a natural way, become part of our maritime heritage. Our maritime industry, to be part of our touristic product, and to be part of our underwater exercise. I think that it is a very important part of legislation. I think that the legislation will help us to build out our marine environment for the full purpose that it is designed for. And it aligns itself. And I think that it timely aligns itself with what we are trying to achieve when we are speaking about our marine spatial plan and how we are supposed to utilize every single sphere of our EEZ so that areas can be demarcated and we can get the full potential from those areas. And one of the areas that this bill would speak to is the area that will preserve our natural assets so that we can protect them as a country and then bring them into the whole gamut of our sustainable development plan as part of our touristic trust. That is the conversation that is happening with this type of legislation. And equally, as a minister that is responsible for the hydrosphere, I have to put my voice to say that not only are we going to define areas for archaeological purposes and for the historic assets in our marine environment, but I must also be able to tell the country today, and confidently so, that we will also have areas for the other aspects of our tourism product. Areas for our pleasure craft and jet ski activities, recreational activities. Areas for our biological diversity and its preservation as the first part of our definition swap as we seek to build out our maritime space. Because we recognize that at least 13 or 40% of that space, if we are going to get the 30-30 goal that we have associated ourselves with, that if we are able to liberate at least 70% on our land space, our biosphere, that equally we can get another 13% or so with the right legislation and the consciousness associated with protecting that legislation from Barbadians, of course, that we can get another 30 to 40% on this in the maritime environment. That is what we have said as a government. Equally, we have also said that there will be spaces allocated for artisanal fishing. There will be spaces allocated for energy as a resource. And I hear the energy from the other side too. But energy as a resource from the maritime space. We have said that there will be areas that will be there to protect our reef, our coral in a natural way. We have said that there will be areas that we will utilize for science and for technology. So with the marine spatial plan, this entire exclusive economic zone would be demarcated using a science-based approach so we can build out our maritime space for the sustainable development of our island as we know it as Barbados, and to ensure that our sustainable development goal 14 will become a reality and just not the Beijing dream. I want to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this legislation that seeks to protect and ensure that member states also protect their historic assets is a legislation that the entire Barbados should feel proud of, because there are a lot of things that we need to protect. It speaks to how the environment in terms of what goes into our environmental space, our marine space, that must also be protected. It speaks to the fact that when the shipwrecks and those that we have those types of procedures, that what goes into the ocean is minus any harmful chemicals or toxins that would pollute that immediate environment. This legislation is a holistic piece of legislation that deals with how we are going to not only preserve, but help us to build out a new dimension in terms of our tourism product. But as I said, the Marine Spatial Plan also seeks to build out how we are going to proceed with artisanal fishing. So it will speak to mariculture as a part of that build out, and to get directly into the fishing industry, because all of us were exposed in some form, fashion, or how to the vagaries of what I would call a very anomaly. The National Hurricane Center said that over the last 10 years, they have not seen anything like it. And there were tracking hurricane and tsunami episodes for the last 10 years or so. They said they have never seen nothing like it. We were all exposed to it. We saw the devastation on our fishing industry. I won't have to date back myself to exactly all the details from July the 1st, but just to say it devastated the industry. Government made the commitment back then, and the Prime Minister, she had 2 meetings with the members of the fishing community. I was there at all the meetings. And subsequently, we have had a number of meetings. I must tell Barbados that I have been at the boatyards on numerous occasions. I will count at least 5 occasions thus far, having conversations with those fishermen to ensure that we get them to come and do the right things as it relates to filling out those forms that are essential and important in terms of collecting the information so that we can process those payments. I must report to the country that along with me agitating, the Chief Fisheries Officer, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry, and all those folks in the Fisheries Division, that we have not had the successful completion of all the forms thus far. I must admit to that. We have not had the successful completion of all the forms thus far. And I must say, because John 8 verses 44 will speak to the devil being the absolute liar. But I would say today, in the fullness of the truth, that we have had some 40 or so persons who have not come forward at all to claim any funds, whether it is through the Benevolent Fund Program or through the 25% that we were giving grant for the repairs of the boats. 40 persons thus far have not ventured anywhere near the fisheries section. They have not come forward to receive benefits. 40 persons so far. I want to also say that the ministry, understanding the dynamics of the fishing industry and what is taking place there, we have decided to employ 4 additional staff members, 4 additional staff members to work directly with the fisher folk to help them fill out the forms, the vending forms. We have now employed an additional person to make phone calls to all those fisher folk. Thank you, Minister. The minister responsible for ensuring that there is just transitioning. So the fisher folk, all the fisher folk, are now able to call the ministry and get some person who is there, and their sole responsibility is to call all those fisher folk with the vending farms who were not correct in filling out the forms, if the forms were incomplete, if there were missing times numbers, those types of challenges, we were able to get some person to do those calls. I must tell you, Madam Deputy Chair, that I spent a whole day down there with the fishing division, calling myself a list to ensure and get those persons to come in and make the corrections, and to ensure that we are able to walk in the journey with our fisher folk so that they can get their monies. We made a determination that persons, the boat owners, would receive $2,000 for 3 months. We also made a determination as a government that the captains and crew would also receive $1,500 for 3 months. So the boat owners will get $2,000 for 3 months, that's the $6,000 in all, and each captain and crew will get $1,500 a month for 3 months. That is $4,500 for captain and $4,500 for a crew. We made that determination as a government in the immediate aftermath of Beryl. Subsequently, we understand obviously that the vendors would have been affected, although not in a direct way in terms of their boats being damaged. But we understand and we made the determination a couple of weeks ago as a cabinet that we would give the vendors a one-off payment of $1,500 as well. I must say, to date, we have paid over 100 vendors to date. Over 100 vendors have been paid, and that is based on persons who came and filled out the form with the TAMIS number, with the ideal information that was suited. I must admit that there were some challenges in terms of banking information. We have persons who had dormant accounts. The information, there was a tedious exercise in terms of getting new banking accounts set up. And again, as a responsible and caring government, we made the decision to give persons checks, to print checks from the Treasury and give to those fisher folk. So for persons who were getting problems in terms of banking information and getting the bank account set up, this government made the determination that those persons would receive checks. I want to report today, Madam Deputy Chair, that, I can get the figures right here, that the total benefits paid from a responsible government, a government that cares about the fishermen, I understand that their business were interrupted, and that because their businesses were interrupted, that we had to respond right away once we collected the right information, because at the end of the day, the government has to account for the money. It is a benevolent fund. It was money that was given via philanthropic drive, but at the end of the day, you have to account for the money. So it was not a situation where a person will come in, there's a big box of money and you hand out $2,000 and $1,500. They had to go through the whole registration process using vendor forms. Some persons, unfortunately, put the name down on the banking information. Some persons put the sisters and brothers and friends. Some persons use alias names on the forms. There were a lot of challenges that we had to work out, and that's why additional staff were put in place. But once the information, the correct information was given on the form, I can give the country the rested assurance that the money was paid in the Treasury. And for those who were getting problems with accounts, we made the determination via the Treasury that those persons would be given checks, and that is what we have been doing for the last couple of weeks. I want to say that as I speak, the total benefits paid thus far, total benefits. I want every person to be in listening ear of my voice now and say $2,750,372.60. I repeat slowly so that person can take note. Total benefits paid so far: $2 million Barbados, 750,000 Barbados dollars, $372.60. Total money paid out to those persons, those fisher folk. Those fisher folk, that's far. Total money paid out. I want to say, a caring government that allows a philanthropic reach out for the fisher folk. And I want to say today that the boats are repaired so far. Total boat repairs amounted to $956,000, $956,189.99. I know that some persons, I am so generous, I repeat, $956,189.99. I am so generous that I won't call it $190. $189.99. That has been paid out so far. Total money paid for benefits for boat owners, captains, crew members, and vendors, as well as grants for boat repairs, is $3 million. I want you to get the figures right. $3,706,563.59. A government that cares, that not only say that they will do, but has shown by its action that it cares about the fisher folk in this country, because it has put its money towards the benefit of the fisher folk when we recognize that their businesses were interrupted. $563.59. That is what has been paid out thus far. And we are continuing the process of paying out benefits as I speak. Because once the forms come in, I just want Barbadians to understand that once the forms come in, this is not an exercise in splitting the atom bomb, the atomic bomb. Once, or the atom, I must say, once the forms come in, the completed forms come in with the requisite information, they are processed. It doesn't matter if it is a folk who is female or male. It doesn't matter if you're tall or short. It doesn't matter if you are as handsome as some persons, even if they sit in the corner to my acute left. It doesn't matter if the young lady is as pretty, Madam Deputy Speaker, as you in your toilet years. All that matters, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that you fill out the form. And we are begging fisher folk who have concerns. I know that there's an office quite opposite the office of the fisheries division, but I don't want it to get disoriented in terms of geographical directions. I want them to stay on the same side as the market. When they walk over the vendors and the fisher folk walk from the market, I want them to walk and keep on this, we call the driving side. Have you ever a driving instructor, they say, keep straight ahead. Don't turn left, don't turn right. I know you don't feel the exam. Keep straight ahead and just stop at the pretty building with the fish. The beautiful building. That is the fisheries division. There's no reason to try to get across the road and get knocked down with a car. So there can get all the answers at the fisheries division, and I'm sure they got 4 additional persons there who are there to answer their concerns. I want to say, Madam Deputy Chair, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the fishing industry is dear to every single person's heart. And we want to see the revival of the industry. We cannot have the maxims on the tongues of every single person that speak to building forward better and all of we and this is who we are, unless we equally put our expenditure to ensure that the industry is able to survive the test of times, albeit that we were met with a serious challenge and anomaly. We understand that. And I want to say that to all those fisher folk who are listening, that if there is a concern, a genuine concern, please come to the Fisheries Division and get your concern dealt with. For those 40 persons who have decided that they're not interested in coming forward and filling out the forms or getting the information, our doors are still open. And as I just said, I give the location pin for the Fisheries Division, so don't be disoriented when you come to the Fisheries Division. It's not immediately across the road. It is right, a nice pretty blue building there, and you can come and get your business dealt with. I just want to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that thus far we have placed back in the ocean, in terms of repair boats, over 45 boats. 45 boats have been repaired and placed back in the ocean to start back their fishing journey. 45 boats. I want to say the total number of boats back in the water is 141. Total number. That is recognizing, of course, those that were not damaged and some that were already getting repaired before the incident took place. So we have 141 boats in our waters right now fishing. And I want to report also that over the last couple, 2 months or so, we have started to export tuna once again. We have started our exportation of tuna. So I want to give persons who may have a little fibrillation of the ventricles of the heart the calm and the rest of the assurance that the industry will recover, we will rebuild, we will ensure that there is a resuscitation of sorts under this administration, and we will build forward better to ensure that the industry survives the test of time. And to say that building forward better requires us to be more resilient. It is a given. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to report today that we have in our port received the armored stones from Norway. The boat is here. We have started to remove the slabs in the market area. We have started the repairs for the build back of our breakwater using more resilient material. The contractors are down there. They had a meeting with the stakeholders already. And I want to say that the work has started so that in the early part of next year, before the middle, we shall have a breakwater that is resilient, that is more resilient, and that will be able to do that which it is supposed to do in terms of protection and ensuring that we are able to resist and to be able to provide a safe haven for our fisher folk. That which existed was able to protect for 35 years, but recognizing, of course, that climate change, if there is no doubt in our minds that climate change is real, the perfect example took place July the 1st. It is as real as it gets. And I want to say that it is real, and it is even more real and evident for us who regard ourselves as small island developing states, who may not have the financial wherewithal to build for immediately, because we recognize that although we contribute very little to this whole climate change phenomenon, I think Barbados produces about 2 million tons or so of carbon dioxide yearly. Very small in the whole scheme of a 40 billion ton that is exposed in the world every single year. Although we contribute very little, we unfortunately are exposed to the vagaries and the adverse behaviors from the systems that confront us. The extreme heats, the extreme rainfall that we see. 1 minute it is over 30 degrees Celsius, and the next day there is nebulous and conditions that flooding that devastate lives. So that is the reality that we live with. I want to say, Madam Deputy Chair, Speaker, that we will continue as a government to do everything in our power to ensure the protection of the industry, and so that we can rescue, rebuild, and restore in our efforts to build forward better. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 2 p.m.
Question is that the Honourable Chamber be suspended until 2 p.m. Honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. The suspension is now until 2 p.m.